In Skyrim, monsters are everywhere. Vicious, horrifying or fantastical beasts are around every turn, and it's rare for the game to actually put much emphasis on this. However, an exception to this rule appears to be good old Morthal, a rather sleepy, boggy town that serves as the capital of the hold of Yarl, seemingly threatened by forces that we're not entirely aware of. And at the centre of that curiosity we have a man shrouded in no small amount of mystery, himself. More or less everybody in town is wary of him, if not outright suspicious, and there's no way of truly ascertaining whether they're justified in their allegations and rumours, or if this social pariah is the only thing standing between Morthal and a bloody reckoning of chaos. In today's video we're going to be attempting to tackle this particular mystery. It's the mystery of a man who clearly knows more about Morthal's situation than he's willing to disclose to anyone. A mage for whom trust among locals is in very short supply indeed. And yet whatever it is that he's up to, he insists upon exercising his agenda in complete secrecy. So, who is Falion? And what is his secret? Our entry point to this mystery occurs upon our arrival in the town of Morthal. This sleepy settlement is hardly booming economically, and bouncing from one problem to another appears to have a gloomy influence on the general outlook of its residents. And not long after first arriving here, events transpire that give us cause to look at that in more depth. And it all begins with a rather disgruntled, uneasy mob on the doorstep of the Yarl's home.
How are we supposed to feel safe in our own homes?
Please, enough already. I have told Ygritte of your concerns. She'll look after you all. Please, go about your business.
We've no need for wizards in our midst.
Morthal has enough problems as it is.
It's no use. Let's get back to it then.
Keep your wits about you. Morthal's hardly a safe place.
So without as much as saying hello to anybody, we've heard the locals complain about feeling unsafe, a local wizard, and generally express their discontent with the Jarl's leadership. Moreover, one of these misery guts pivots and warns us directly that Morthal isn't exactly a safe place. And so it goes without saying that local government probably has their hands full here. However, for more insight into what's eating this dreary town, we're going to have to get stuck into some conversations.
The mill is my responsibility, and that's what I care about, that's all. Understand?
You seem upset about something.
The world's going mad, and our Jarl does what? She hides inside with her visions. We need a leader, not some mystic.
So what isn't the Jarl dealing with?
Trust you saw the house that burned down. Peculiar bit of business that was. And that's on top of noises from the marsh in the night. Tales of monsters. Now this wizard in our midst. What's a man to do if he can't look to his Jarl for help?
This damned war has cost us. Me. Everything. My boy is to grow up without a mother? What life is that? It's not right, I tell you. Hasn't been seen for a while. She just vanished without a trace. Some say the swamp took her. Part of me wishes it were that simple.
You get the idea. The more we interact with people, the more Morthal's issues appear to pile up. We've only interacted with 2 people so far, and I'm already losing count. So perhaps it's worth talking with the steward who just took the brunt of the Jarl's disgruntled subjects.
I do what I can to see that Ygritte's time isn't wasted, and that she only has to deal with important matters.
Morthal seems like a quiet little town.
That's what many here wanted. A quiet life in a quiet place, without the noise or the trouble of a city. Now some worry this wizard Falion will foul it all up.
Yes, okay.
What was that argument outside the hall?
Ah, you saw that, did you? Life in Morthal has been troubled lately. The people are uncertain, restless, They merely look to the Yarl for leadership.
So, what's going wrong in Morthal?
There's news of rebellion against the Empire. Strange noises have been heard in the marshes at night. And then, the tragedy with Rogar's home. The men simply seek wisdom. Everything will be fine.
Asilfa's insights into Morthal's woes seem to suggest that as far as he's concerned at least, the locals simply need guidance. And while we'll no doubt cross-section a few of Morthal's troubles as we go along, I'm sure it hasn't escaped your notice that frequently the wizard, or Falion, is brought up in conversation.
You ask me, we'd be better off without that wizard in town.
And so we can discern that we've got a township going through a plethora of struggles, and a mage of some description named Falion has recently arrived. And perhaps more so as a natural response to their own plight rather than him himself, those who predate his time here in general seem awfully distrustful of him. And that's hardly surprising for a Nord-dominated town, considering their propensity for distrust if not blatant disdain for magic and sorcerers. After all, from the perspective of a Nord, so much misfortune afoot and what I can gather to be the fairly recent arrival of a wizard would come across as a curious coincidence at the best of times, so even in absence of apparent evidence that Falion has done much of anything wrong, it would seem among the denizens of Morthal there's a brewing sentiment against him. Perhaps the Yarl will help shed some light on this situation, a Yarl who herself would seem magically gifted.
You will not disrespect Jarl Idgrod while in this hall. Do we have an understanding?
Why would I disrespect her?
It's no secret that Jarl Idgrod is different. It's also no secret that there are rumors about her and her visions. I won't repeat them, and I won't allow them to be spread under this roof. Now you go about your business.
I understand you have visions.
The divines reveal things to me at times, yes. I do not hide this. It is a gift. Anyone who believes otherwise does not and cannot understand it.
Okay, cool. Down to the point. Is there some kind of trouble in Morthal?
That which is unknown can create unease, even fear. It is to be expected. Some fear our new resident wizard. As they grow to know him, they will accept him. Time will prove me right.
So the Yarl who has visions doesn't seem too concerned about Falion, and she chalks some of the locals being suspicious of him down to simply not being familiar with him. Simply put, this minimises the alarm bells around Falion's presence. However, it's in meeting the man himself that things become a touch more interesting. The Redguard mage can typically be found within his home, and upon initiating conversation with him for the first time, let's just say he's come to expect distrust and rumour surrounding him.
If you stand before me to accuse me of sacrificing children or eating the hearts of the dead, you may save your breath! I have done no such thing, nor do I intend to. I simply wish to live my life in peace!
So then, what do you do?
I keep to myself. I offer spells and scrolls to those who need them, and wisdom in conjuration magic for those who wish to learn. Beyond that, I seek only to be left alone to pursue my research.
So why set up shop in Morthal?
As anyone will tell you, Morthal can be a dangerous place. My talents are useful here. I help maintain order, even if it goes unnoticed.
What can you tell me about the area?
The marsh is treacherous. You would do well to not wander at night.
Though Falion is obviously being quite vague with his answers, there is a lot that can be gathered from the statements he provides us. We learn, for instance, that he's not just any mage, he's a conjurer in particular, and it's worth adding here that he's a master trainer in the school of conjuration, meaning he is beyond a highly skilled authority on that subject. We also learn that even if he's unappreciated by his neighbours, Falion claims to be protecting Morthal, and doesn't blatantly dismiss the local superstitions regarding their surrounding marsh. He's as convinced as the next man that Morthal can be dangerous and advises us not to go out at night, and will embed these points in other offhand lines of dialogue.
My talents are much needed here in order to keep Morthal safe.
So if Morthal, whether its residents are aware of it or not, require Falion's talents as a master conjurer in order to stay safe, then I think it's fair to assume that Morthal is in a much, much more dangerous position than a mere economic crisis caused by a civil war. Off the back of being an effective backwater to begin with, almost literally considering the dominating geology of the region. And if anybody in Morthal is to know what's plaguing this part of Skyrim, I think it's fair to say that it's him. This does justify his neighbour's skittishness somewhat, because the implication is something is desperately wrong. And before we go shining a torch on what that might refer to, it may be worth observing Falion's domestic situation. Though somewhat introverted, simply desiring to be left alone, Falion has a ward, an apprentice, a young girl named Agni. She lives here in Morthal with him, in his home, and it's clear that she's learning from the wizard.
My mother and father died years ago. Falion takes care of me now. I asked Falion if someday I could learn from the mages in Winterhold, but he doesn't like that idea.
So he's taken in this orphan and is teaching her some of what he knows, and yet he seems against the idea of Agni going to study at the College of Winterhold when she's older. Perhaps her skill level isn't that promising, or perhaps there's more to this story if we seek answers at the college itself. There is dialogue between the two characters that would suggest that Falion used to be at the College of Winterhold, but he doesn't value it as significant to his development of magical aptitude. But before we go and pick up that story there, he does have an actual relative in Morthal at the Moorside Inn, the local tavern, home to perhaps the world's worst bard. And it's here where, while this orc stands in the corner and quietly pretends to be talented, we can learn the innkeeper is actually Falion's sister. And as her dialogue would suggest, she's quite protective of her brother.
Running an inn weren't my plan, but Falion decided to move here, so I joined him. Falion had his work to keep him busy, and I needed something to do. So, here I am. I take what little business I can get. I'm grateful for anyone willing to spend money here.
Out of curiosity, where can I learn more about magic?
You looking for Falion? Why don't you go bother those mages at their college in Winterhold and leave my brother alone?
I get the impression Yona isn't best pleased with the general treatment that Falion has received here in Morthal, and it's got to a point where even if we simply ask where we can learn about magic, she'd rather direct us away to the College of Winterhold than towards her local master conjurer brother, who despite his gruffness and unearned reputation, is actually more than happy to receive that kind of business. Nonetheless, the presence of a relative and a ward of sorts help contribute to the notion that Falion's intentions for Morthal are as he says they are. Even though he's not the most popular man in town, he does have people he cares about here, and there's no real reason to necessarily doubt his claim that his work helps protect the town. And in saying that, he makes it obvious that he's up to something, but simply doesn't disclose what, and that is his secret. To learn more about him, however, first it might prove worthwhile to venture into his past. And naturally that means momentarily leaving Morthal and making our presence known in the northeast at the College of Winterhold, where there is somebody we can actually talk to about Falion. Finis Gester, or however you pronounce his name. I refuse to believe there's a variation of pronunciation that actually rolls off the tongue nicely. And just like Falion, he specialises in conjuration.
If you require assistance with summoning techniques, please let me know. If you would, please also contain your summons to the college grounds. The locals do not need to be agitated further by Atronachs roaming their town. The summoning of undead is even less advisable outside the college.
So wait, the summoning of undead isn't frowned upon?
I sure know. Those archaic policies died out with the Mages Guild, and were never enforced here. Necromancy, as any other type of magic, is a tool to be used. Of course, non-mages may not see it that way, so we don't go around flaunting it.
So, are there any conjurers outside of the college?
Not within society, no. Many who practice within the School of Conjuration do so on their own, secretly. Falion is the only one I know who is public about what he does. He was once my teacher here, but left the college years ago.
Why did Falion leave the college?
He didn't like the Archmage, hated dealing with him, hated having to answer to him. Falion said he hated what this place was becoming, so he just left. Oren found a note on his desk, and that was it. I understand he settled down in Yarl, and his presence there caused something of a problem.
So, Falion used to teach at the College of Winterhold, but left because he didn't like the Archmage. Sounds fairly straightforward. A lot of people leave their jobs because they don't like their bosses, but the big takeaway from Bethesda, the current conjuration teacher at the college, and former pupil of Falion's, is that conjurers in society are fairly uncommon, which makes sense of his presence causing a stir, especially when you realise that necromancy isn't frowned upon or banned at the College of Winterhold. It's simply advised to not go flaunting it where others who won't understand can see. And if Falion's former pupil views it as a tool for study, there's a good chance he himself shares similar views on it, and being a master conjurer, it's unlikely that he hasn't dabbled. And while I'd never argue that puts us squarely at the bottom of this mystery, it certainly might serve to help explain his reclusiveness and secrecy. And since we're led to believe he's not shy about his general skill set, it's not surprising the locals of Morthal are at the very least a tad cautious of him. And so our trip to Winterhold has yielded that Falion is not happy with what the college has become, explaining his relocation, and in failing elaborating what exactly it is that he is hiding, we do come away with a pretty good idea as to why he would hide it. Because he's distrusted enough without disclosing the specifics. So as a result, he keeps things vague.
Morthal is a troubled place. It's my duty to see it rest in peace.
So perhaps to learn more, we'll need to tackle this from the other direction. We know that whatever Falion is up to is tied to Morthal's troubles. After all, his dialogue suggests as much, but what are those troubles? We know the war between the Empire and the Stormcloak Rebellion has done little to aid Yarl's economic prowess, but that on its own probably wouldn't draw Falion into action. However, another big talking point among the masses might just be. I am of course talking about the rumours of strange noises and occurrences coming from the surrounding swamp. And aside from the ominous feeling of the area's boggy nature, there isn't much that stands out as a miscellaneous point. There are a couple unmarked locations, one of which Falion actually ventures out to at night, but I'll address that when we come back to the flip side. And the only other thing worthy of note is a one-off encounter with a ghost at a location called Kienstag Ruins. And this spectre of a man clad in ancient Nordic armour simply runs from this location, and should you elect to follow him, will lead you to a smaller burial site where you'll have to fight a couple bandits and you get some meagre level dependent loot, which doesn't appear to be a major groundbreaking threat to Morthal's safety that requires the unique expertise of a master conjurer to quell. Although it's an experience I didn't even know existed in Skyrim until I started researching for this video. But to move off of the odd bits and bats, there is actually a rather menacing, sinister force operating in this swamp, with less than benevolent intentions for the struggling people of Morthal. And to begin to unravel that, we'll need to return to the town from the swamp and turn our investigation skills on a burned down house. Now this dwelling is, or more accurately was, the house of Nord lumberjack Hrogar, an abode he shared with his wife and daughter, both of whom lost their lives when the building burned. And yet Hrogar here keeps to himself and cracks on.
I'm not one for talk. Try to keep to myself. Alva's been good to me ever since the fire. I just try and do my job and not think about what's happened.
You can certainly forgive one for becoming emotionally detached from the world following such a traumatic event, but the truth is much more sinister here. There are many locals we can ask for more details about the story of Hrogar's home, and they'll all answer with the same thing.
It's bad luck to talk about that place. Yarl's been looking for someone who ain't superstitious now. Be looking for a fool, if you ask me.
This begins the side quest Laid to Rest, and you know what that means. It means the Yarl has found her fool, and so she naturally becomes our next stop. I hear you want someone to look into that house fire.
Hrogar's house fire? Well, he lost his wife and daughter in the blaze. My people believe it to be cursed now. Who am I to gainsay them?
And what does Hrogar say happened?
Hrogar blames his wife for spilling bear fat in the fire. Many folk think he set the fire himself.
Why would he do that to his own family?
Lust can make a man do the unthinkable. The ashes were still warm when he pledged himself to Alpha.
So, why haven't you arrested him?
On rumor and gossip? No. But you, a stranger, might find the truth for us. Sift through the ashes that others are too fearful to touch. See what they tell you. Should you prove him guilty or innocent, I will reward you.
Ideal, with the Yarl's approval, to start poking around the burned-down home. It's easy to miss that a couple avenues of dialogue open up at this early juncture. Firstly, with Hrogar. I heard your house burned down.
That's true, but I'm in a new house now, a better house.
What about your wife and child?
Yeah, that was a shame. But now Alva takes care of me and I take care of her. Good day.
Now that is eerie. His response isn't emotionally conventional considering he just lost his wife and child in a house fire. In fact, it's like there's no emotions there at all. He's entirely vacant. So perhaps it's time we speak with his new lover, Alva.
These people are like cattle. All they do is work, sleep, and eat. Gathering plants, picking mushrooms, brewing potions. It all gets so dreary after a while. This town needs something exciting to happen.
They say Hrogar burned down his house for you.
Do they? How delightful. I'm lucky to have a man that is so devoted to me.
It doesn't take a prime sleuth to detect something isn't quite right about that new couple. Hrogar's house burned down, killing his wife and child. He immediately finds himself in a relationship with Alva, and neither one of them is the slightest bit interested in the emotional weight of the tragedy, nor the fact there are rumours Hrogar burned the house down. In fact, Alva finds that charming. These conversations make it imperative that we investigate that house, and it really doesn't take long of doing so for us to discover something. An elephant in the room, or should I say, a ghost.
Who's there? Is that you, Father?
Who are you?
Helgi. But Father says I'm not supposed to talk to strangers. Are you a stranger?
No, I'm a friend. Do you know what happened to your house?
The smoke woke me up. I was hot and I was scared, so I hid. Then it got cold and dark. I'm not scared anymore. But I'm lonely. Will you play with me?
If I do, will you tell me who started the fire?
Okay, let's play hide and seek. You find me, and I'll tell you. We have to wait for nighttime, though. The other one is playing too, and she can't come out until then.
The other one? What do you mean?
I can't tell you. She might hear me. She's so close. If you can find me first, I can tell you.
Now, playing hide and seek with a juvenile apparition is hardly my idea of a good time. However, Helgi's hiding spot is an unburied coffin situated up a ridge behind the house that shouldn't be too tricky to find. And sure enough, should we come here at night, the other one will arrive. And as it turns out, she is Laylette, a vampire, who we must subsequently relieve of her cranium privileges. And it's revealed upon the arrival of her husband that she was a resident of Morthal who went missing in the swamp.
She's dead. Laylette is dead.
What can you tell me about your wife?
Laylette. I thought she left to join the Stormcloaks. Oh, my poor Laylette.
Did you notice anything strange before she left?
She began to spend a lot of time with Alva. Yet just a week before, she despised her. In fact, the night she disappeared, she was supposed to meet Alva. Alva told me later that she never showed up. I never got to tell her goodbye.
I think they may have met after all.
You think Alva? But that means... Ye gods! You think Alva is a vampire?
It's a possibility we can't ignore, I'm afraid.
No, you're wrong. You must be wrong. Laylette may have met her fate out in the marsh. I refuse to believe Alva had anything to do with this. There is no way you can prove it to the Yarl. I hope Alva is not what you think.
Unfortunately, that makes a lot of sense. Vampires are seldom found on their own. If Laylette was one, and she went off to meet with Alva the last time she was seen as a human, then it would appear Morthal has a vampire in its midst. It also may explain matey lad Hrogar's apathy for his dead family. He's been enthralled. From her coffin, Helgi tells us who set the fire.
You found me! Laylette was trying to find me too, but I'm glad you found me first. Laylette was told to burn Mommy and me, but she didn't want to. He wanted to play with me forever and ever.
Laylette. She's dead.
He kissed me on the neck, and I got so cold that the
she's
fire
a vampire. She's dead.
Laylette thought she could take me and
Laylette
keep
is
me,
dead.
but she can't. I'm all burned up. I'm tired. I'm gonna sleep for a while now.
So Laylette was instructed to burn Hrogar's home, although she didn't necessarily want to, fueling the notion that at the very least there is another vampire on the loose, and at this point in the story there's very little doubt as to who that might be. And upon investigating Alva's home, Hrogar will turn hostile, forcing us to kill him, and it will be in the basement where our suspicions are confirmed. For it's down here that Alva has a coffin, and in that coffin we can find her journal, that reads as follows. My life is dreary. Where is my prince come to rescue me? Where is my bold Nord warrior to sweep me off my feet? I met a man today when picking night flowers. He is exciting and exotic. We kissed in the moonlight. It was so romantic. I'm going to see him again tonight. Now I understand the true colours of the night. Movarth has shown me the true black of night and the true red of blood. He has promised me a feast of blood if I do his bidding in Morthal. Hrogar was easy to seduce. Movarth said I should find a protector first, someone to watch over my coffin during the day. Hrogar is perfect. Laylette came to visit me today. She slaked my thirst. I've hidden her away to let her rise as my handmaiden. I've spread the rumour in town that she left to join the war. Fools. Movarth has confided his grand plan to me. I am to seduce the guardsmen one at a time and make them my slaves. Then he and the others from the coven can descend upon Morthal and take the entire town. We won't kill them. They will become cattle for our thirst, an endless supply of blood and an entire town to protect us from the cursed sun. Hrogar's family is becoming inconvenient. I've told Laylette to kill them all, but make it look like an accident. Hrogar must be seen as innocent if he is going to be my protector. That little fool, Laylette burned Hrogar's family alive. I asked for an accident and she gave me a scandal. To make matters worse, she tried to turn his little girl Helgi, except Laylette couldn't even get that right. She killed the child and left the body to burn. Something is wrong with Laylette. She keeps talking about Helgi. I think her mind has snapped. She seems to think that the child can still be brought back to be her companion. There is a stranger in town, looking into the fire. I'll have to be careful. Not only is this a confession that explains how Hrogar's family home burned down, and why he seems so vacant if not blatantly apathetic towards the loss of his family, but we also now have definitive confirmation that Alva is a vampire. But the bad news for the residents of Morthal is she's just the tip of the iceberg. And there is in fact an entire coven of the monstrosities nearby, waiting for their insider to weaken the town so they can descend. And to finally bring it back to Falion before you forget what this video is actually supposed to be about, that seems more like the kind of threat you'd want a rather intelligent individual on the case of. And since he claims to be trying to keep Morthal safe, could it mean from this? The Laid to Rest quest presents the people of Morthal with an existential threat, and you'll be disappointed to discover that Falion has absolutely zero involvement. We warn the Yarl ourselves and she sends us to deal with it.
So it's true, the traitorous bitch. Morthal owes you a debt. Here, you were promised a reward for solving the crime, but I need one more favor from you. Morthal is still in danger. The journal mentions Movarth, a master vampire I thought was destroyed a century ago. I'll gather together some able-bodied warriors to clean out Movarth's lair. They'll be waiting outside for you to lead them.
We lead the angry mob of inexperienced yokels and face the master vampire ourselves. And he and his ilk are based in a cave a relative stone's throw away from the township. and without any input from Falion at any point in this quest, we fight our way through the cave, eliminate Movarth, eradicate the vampire threat, and bring peace to Helgi's soul. You'd think it would be too big of a thing to miss for such a powerful wizard who claims to be protecting Morthal, but there you go, at no point does he become relevant. This leaves us with a few possibilities. I'm not convinced he's on the vampire's side, for instance, but it's entirely possible he's aware of this brewing threat and had his own plan accordingly, we just swooped in. Or simply put, when he claims to be keeping Morthal safe, he means from something else altogether. No matter, I do think the presence of vampires, either way, bears some significance. With Movarth out the way, undoubtedly a good thing for the people of Morthal, we can return our attention fully to Falion here. For like I said earlier, he does have a rather clandestine nocturnal schedule. He spends the bulk of his day pottering around his house, but at night, he's known to go for a bit of a wander. He will leave his gaff and walk not just through the town of Morthal, but out into the swamp. And should we tail him, he will lead us to an otherwise unmarked location, somewhere away from prying eyes. An ancient stone structure of some description, complete with a finely detailed circle. Beyond the act of coming here, Falion doesn't do anything particularly noteworthy while here, he simply loiters for a bit. But he will be far less than pleased that we followed him, should we choose to confront him. What are you doing here?
What I am doing is none of your business. Why are you here? Did you follow me? I demand that you leave at once and never speak of this again.
But I'd like to know what it is you're up to.
I am under no obligation to tell you anything. Now leave me at once and never mention that you saw me.
We have two options to either respect his request or simply fleece him for money, but the eyebrow-raising takeaway point is that he wants you to never mention that you saw him here. Is that so the disdainful residents of Morthal don't mob the place in a bout of ignorance? Or is there perhaps a more interesting reason behind why he doesn't want anybody to know that he comes here? Whatever secret he is keeping, and however angry he may be that we followed him, he simply sends us on our way. He doesn't threaten us, nor does he summon a Daedra to clobber us or something, which to me is just fuel for the argument that Falion is not a bad guy, but sadly he doesn't volunteer any information that might shed light on what he's actually doing. And perhaps as a limitation in game, he doesn't actually do anything that we can see. He just comes out here to hang about, before returning to Morthal as the sun comes up. And no matter how hard we try or what dialogue options we choose, there's no prying information from him. We, along with every sorry sod in Morthal, are to remain ignorant to what he actually does. Now if we're feeling particularly spiteful, regardless of whether or not we took a bribe from him to keep our mouths shut, we can report our anecdote of his activities to the Yarl. I thought you should know Falion's up to something.
Ah, Falion. Always looking where he shouldn't for things he doesn't need. What has he done now?
He's casting spells out in the marsh in the middle of the night.
Ah, so it is not just dreams then. I have seen this. I will see that it is dealt with. Thank you for bringing clarity.
And now the Yarl is off to confront Falion, or glitch, and perpetually follow him for the rest of your save. Dialogue-wise, we're not missing much. The Yarl simply states that she would like Falion to stop whatever he's up to, and he's forced to agree. But he does keep up his nocturnal escapades, and the Yarl will be left none the wiser. But it's not really what I take away from reporting Falion to the Yarl. It's more a good statement that Falion's always searching where he shouldn't for things that he doesn't need, which is a hell of a remark from somebody who supposedly has visions. The implication appears to be that Falion is searching for something, and I suppose the question there would be what? What could a master conjurer want that the swamps of Morthal can provide? For the moment, let's focus on bringing something full circle, and that is the coincidence of a coven of vampires operating just outside the town that Falion happens to be in. If we happen to be of the vampiric persuasion ourselves, and ask any innkeeper what rumours they've heard of late, we can be blessed with this response.
They say Falion of Morthal has studied vampires, Draugr, and all matter of undead.
And this will dawn a quest to cure our blood-sucking affliction that instantly drives us to our favourite conjurer's doorstep. I hear you're an expert in vampirism.
I know many things. I've studied things beyond the reach of most humans. Traveled the Oblivion Plains, seen things one should not see. I have met Daedra and Dwemer, and everything in between, and I know enough to see a vampire where others would see a man.
How can you be so sure I'm a vampire?
I met several of your kind during my studies of life-extending magics. I even considered becoming a vampire myself. In the end, vampirism would endanger my ward Agni, which would defeat the intended purpose.
Righto, well, I'm looking for a cure.
It is possible. I know of a ritual but have never performed it. It requires a filled black soul gem. You will need to kill someone. When you have a gem and have filled it, return to me and I will perform the ritual. I will bring life to your dead body, vampire.
Not only is Falion well versed in detecting vampires, he's also aware of, and better yet, willing to try a ritual to restore life to our dead vampiric body. As for his other claims, we'll get to those. But in order for him to carry out the ritual, we will need to bring him a filled black soul gem, meaning chances are good we'll need to kill someone. Upon our success, here's how things develop.
Very well. Meet me at the summoning circle in the marsh at dawn. We shall banish the creature you have become.
And with that we learn that this site is indeed a summoning circle, which does narrow down what Falion, a master conjurer, might be doing here an awful lot, and now he's asking us to meet him here at the crack of dawn.
Good, you're here.
Let's get this over with.
As you desire. I call upon Oblivion Realms, the home of those who are not our ancestors. Answer my plea. As in death there is new life, in Oblivion there is a beginning for that which has ended. I call forth that power. Accept the soul that we offer. As the sun ends the night, end the darkness of this soul. Return life to the creature you see before you. The ritual is complete.
And after that, Falion will default and pretend this never happened. Once you're a fully fledged vampire, he is the only cure, and you can go through this quest as many times as you're unfortunate enough to find yourself suddenly undead. This makes him of a rare variety, and as indicated by his other statements, he has some vampiric expertise, so perhaps Alva's being a vampire in Morthal didn't fly under his radar after all. But if that were the case and he truly cared about the future of Morthal, then why wasn't he involved in that quest? But you see how Falion and the local coven of vampires meet an interesting crossroads. The man has studied many forms of life-extending magics, including vampirism, and even at one point considered becoming a vampire himself, not following through because it would endanger his ward, Agni, which he claims defeats the point. And that raises a question: what actually is his point? That he wishes to extend his own life to be there to look out for her, or to serve as a guinea pig to hopefully extend hers? But why? He's not an awfully old bloke himself, not that Skyrim has the most accurate portrayals of aging, so perhaps Falion is older than he looks. After all, he is a master in his chosen field, an accomplishment that no doubt takes a lifetime, and has to have some motivation for looking into what he refers to as life-extending magics. And perhaps his secret, what he's doing out in the swamp at night at this summoning circle, is in pursuit of that objective. As for his other claims, he claims to have travelled the plains of Oblivion, and has seen much that he shouldn't have. He also claims to have communicated with Daedra and Dwemer, and as he puts it, everything in between. Perhaps he's trying to convince us that he can indeed cure our vampirism, but we are really given no true reason to doubt the Master Conjurer. And well, simply put, the traversing of Plains of Oblivion is not something to be undertaken lightly. and perhaps it's not a stretch to believe that expertise gained on those exploits helped him cure us. Now, it isn't abundantly clear how the ritual works, but based on its contents it appears that Falion is petitioning the Planes of Oblivion in a general sense to trade one soul for the purification of the vampire intended to be cured. Now, in my research I didn't get the clearest answer as to what happens to a vampire's soul upon their death, but it is known the corruption that causes vampirism was created by Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of domination and enslavement, to keep things advertiser friendly, and one belief is a vampire's soul will wind up in his realm of oblivion, Coldharbour, in which case the ritual would be trading a soul later for a soul now. But another belief is Molag Bal's claim on a vampire's soul is tenuous and that vampire still has some agency over what becomes of their soul when their body dies. And so in that case the ritual would be offering a guaranteed soul, in exchange for releasing one that might not even wind up in Coldharbour, in which case it would make sense for the ritual to work without further bargaining. Either way, Falion curing us of vampirism is the first time he attempts the ritual, so it's not a part of his secret, but it's good to sort of understand or at least interpret. And since such a seemingly straightforward method of curing vampirism isn't widely available or known, it says a lot about the level that Falion is at, that he can petition a Daedric prince without invoking their name. And now that we've adequately advertised how pathetic my understanding of Elder Scrolls lore actually is, we can turn our focus to the big question. What is he doing coming to a summoning circle in the middle of the night? He's not coming here to meet with other vampires and cure them, as he claims we're the first, through the suggestion that he's never performed the ritual before. But fortunately that doesn't mean a brick wall, because when you hear this question you'll immediately know what the answer is. What use would a conjurer have for a summoning circle? Simply put, summoning. And the following dialogue between Agni and Falion would suggest that that's exactly what he's doing.
I had a bad dream again last night.
Oh?
I dreamt that you went away. You made monsters. It was scary. It was like it was real.
It's just a dream, child, nothing more. Hush now. Think no more of it.
Now, a child's dream doesn't probably seem like the most reliable of accounts, but we're led to believe that Agni is being taught by Falion, which means she must have some magical potential, or is at least open to some form of magical influence. And it's worth noting this girl is hardly alone in Morthal being able to have visions, for not only is the Yarl capable of such a feat, but her son Yorick is as well. And we can ask the Jarl's daughter what's wrong with her brother.
My brother is sensitive. He has trouble focusing his attention on things. We were taking him to the Temple of Kinnereth in Whiterun, just so the healers could make sure he was in good health, and they say he's fine. Are you heading to Whiterun? Could you take this letter to the priestess, Danica Purespring? It's a note about Yorick's health.
I'll be glad to help, I promise I won't sneakily read it.
Thank you. Until next time.
The note about the boy's health reads as follows. Sister Danica, Yorick's mood is still melancholic, but he is otherwise in strong health. The potions you have given me have eased his nightmares, but I am afraid my family's gifts run strong in his veins. Igrid the Younger. And so young Yorick here has inherited his mother's gift of seeing.
Poor child. Magic runs deep in that family's bloodline. It's not always a blessing.
So we don't even need to leave Morthal to find an instance of a child having visions that present in dreams. Granted, it comes naturally to Yorick as it does to his mother, as something that's presented to be a family inheritance of sorts.
I haven't Mother's gift. Not quite. But I've seen things.
Now that comes naturally to Yorick, however, Agni is actually studying magic under Falion, and the idea that she too is capable of having visions is enforced by the fact that the dream she recounts to Falion doesn't sound too outlandish based on what we've seen the Master Conjurer actually do in the game. And so, according to her, he goes out away from Morthal and makes monsters, which is her perception of things, but the more likely explanation is Falion is going to the summoning circle and conjuring, and the monsters could be anything from Atronachs to the undead to Daedra. And from the inexperienced perception of a child, you can understand how those entities would be rationalized to be monsters, even if the truth isn't quite so straightforward. But why Falion might be out here conjuring things fortunately is. He's simply continuing his research, advancing his knowledge, far beyond what he needs, as Yarl Igrid Ravencrone might suggest, but complacency after all is the enemy of mastery. As for the secrecy, conjuration magic leads to avenues that many would deem controversial. He's public about his abilities but seeks seclusion, so he can study and practice freely in an environment that doesn't endanger Morthal. As for his suggestion that the swamps around Morthal can be a less than safe place, he's not exactly wrong, but the same statement is true for lots of Skyrim. But what it is a very convenient smokescreen. As suspicious of him as the people of Morthal are, they'll never follow him out there. They'll never trail him through the dangerous bogs just to see what it is he's up to. Especially not when he exclusively braves the swamps at night. And that might also be a huge factor for why he moved to Morthal in the first place. It's one of the few places where he knows of a site where he can go, where he won't be interrupted, he won't be followed, and he won't be seen, so he can responsibly practice his school of magic. Because who in their right mind in society is venturing out into a cold, muddy, ancient, haunted swamp? And while we're at it, perhaps the supernatural phenomena known to occur out here is another drawing factor for a mage such as Falion. The region certainly doesn't lack for other conjurers in the form of necromancers, and so perhaps there's just something in the area that's attractive to conjurers. So let's rationalise that. Bogs are naturally going to preserve corpses well. There's good cover for less than socially acceptable activity as people don't haplessly wander. And if people do disappear, it's not uncharacteristic for them to never be seen again. Take Laylette for instance. Her disappearance wasn't a unique cause for concern that implied the presence of something. She simply vanished kind of plausibly before you factor in the supernatural truth. And then taking into consideration supernatural aspects, the Elder Scrolls Online Greymoor actually expands upon this subject, especially with regards to why necromancers might take interest in the region surrounding Morthal. Fortunately for my not an online gaming enjoying mind, it's not something viciously expansive, but it pertains to a location I've already mentioned once in this video, and that is of course the location where in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim we can meet the ghost, John Spooky or something. I am of course talking about the Kienstag Ruins. The Elder Scrolls Online implies Kienstag Ruins houses a spiritual presence that the game mysteriously refuses to explain, and the quest Long Journey Home sees the marshes of Morthal affected by these spirits, and as a result the region has its fair share of unwelcome undead. And though we don't really hear the story of what actually happened at Kienstag Ruins to make it so, we do know the events circa the Elder Scrolls Online were caused by a necromancer being drawn to the place. However, we're spared the story of why that might be, so Kienstag can be left in peace. And now I can stop paraphrasing paraphrases. What if, though the story behind this place is long since lost, it still houses that attractive power, and as a result, necromancers are naturally drawn to the region surrounding Morthal? And Falion, though he's more broadly speaking a conjurer, I have a pretty solid feeling he's not adverse to dabbling. Perhaps he's searching for this site, a place he shouldn't, for something he doesn't need. As stated by the Yarl, Igrid Ravencrone, should you report his activities to her. Perhaps the power housed here was a drawing factor for his arrival in Morthal, or perhaps it's just a coincidence. Either way, it is interesting that one of the very few open conjurers in society would set up shop only a relative short distance away from such a site. Whatever he specifically is up to, Yarl Ravencrone seems to know more about it than she lets on, as she does state she has had visions of Falion at the summoning circle, or at the very least up to something in the woods, and doesn't seem terribly threatened by this behaviour, simply telling Falion to behave himself. The game doesn't give us any satisfying exposition that might explain what specifically Falion is intending to accomplish, but it never seriously calls into question his intentions. Whatever he's up to, he doesn't intend to pose a threat to Morthal at the very least, and probably has earnest intentions towards the town and genuinely wishes to protect it. As for why the Yarl might bid to warn him away, perhaps she's aware that if her visions are true, Falion is on the precipice of discovering something dangerous that could backfire. Or she's just concerned about the fact that he's creeping people out. hence the telling off as opposed to any actual action. It would seem perhaps Falion's most dangerous trait is the fact that he thinks he knows best, as implied both by his general demeanour and his history at the College of Winterhold, ending because he didn't want to answer to the Archmage. If his stories of traversing the plains of oblivion, communicating with Daedra, Dwemer, and vampires are to be believed, and they are when he then goes and uses those apparent experiences to cure vampirism at a summoning circle with a soul gem and a few fancy ritualistic words, then it's clear he's no stranger to wading through incredibly dangerous territory. And sure, he's managed thus far without selling his soul, to our knowledge, nor has he, as far as we can tell, caused a massive catastrophe. But if he is fueled by the mere enthusiasm for learning alone, he's going to continually punch further and further. Perhaps the Yarl worries that inevitably, no matter how safe Falion thinks he's being, one day there will be unintended consequences in his relentless pursuit of power and knowledge. Now, I'm aware this video has turned into a bit of a washing machine as per the inclination of the subject, but unfortunately with regards to Falion nothing is 100% clear. We can't gather his true motivations, we can't gather what he's up to, and we don't know if that poses any form of danger as such. With Morthal as a backdrop, there are also 1,000,001 distractions. We can't even gather which of his statements are true and which are misleading, or if indeed the bulk sit in one category or the other. And if you look up theories as to how his cure for vampirism works, you'll find 16 billion alternate ideas. He could be communicating with a Daedric prince. He could be communicating with the ideal masters in the Soulken. He could very well be calling to nothing in particular, with only awareness of the ritual and the fact that something clearly answers. But if he is aware of what is answering and that meaning is understood through his words, and that's what makes the ritual work, could it reveal knowledge of a Daedric constant, a relationship between Falion and one of the princes that allows such a vague ritual to work in the first place? And if so, which? There is a theory I've seen circulating that attributes some of Morthal's goings-on to the Daedric prince Vermina, whose sphere is the realm of dreams and nightmares, and it is said that all mortals come under her sway as they sleep. And let's just say she has entanglements nearby in the neighbouring hold of the Pale, where the residents of its capital, Dawnstar, are plagued with nightmares.
It has to be. I've got to get out of this town.
Thoring runs the inn. Speak to him.
Irgnir,
Yes?
take a hold of yourself. They're just dreams. Please tell her, Erandur.
Listen to your friend.
Need something?
They are just dreams, my dear. I assure you that it is quite normal.
It's the same dream over and over again. You think that's normal? It's evil, I tell you. Erandur, she has a point. You keep telling us no harm will follow these dreams, but they must be an omen.
Everyone, please.
Good day.
I'm doing what I can to end these nightmares.
What's wrong with everyone round here?
The entire town is being plagued by horrible nightmares. They're in serious danger, but I'm afraid there's little I can do about it.
Don't be ridiculous. Dreams are harmless.
In any other circumstance, I'd agree with you. However, these aren't normal dreams. The Daedric Lord Vermina's voracious hunger for memories is responsible for these visions. The nightmares are an echo of her presence as she feeds. Vermina resides in a strange realm known as Quagmire, a nightmarish land where reality shifts upon itself in seemingly impossible ways. From her citadel at the center, she reaches forth to collect our memories, leaving nothing in return apart from visions of horror and despair.
And what does she do with the memories?
Who can say? Perhaps she collects them for display like works of art in a nonsensical art gallery. Whatever the case may be, her intentions are far from benevolent.
So what Aranda tells us is Dawnstar is gripped by a powerful Daedric prince who feeds on the memories of mortals, leaving behind nightmarish dreams that horrify the victim. How this, I suppose, applies to Morthal is we have 3 characters that we can suspect have visions that present in dreams. Yarl Ravencrone, who believes her ability is a gift from the divines, and she doesn't awfully make a fuss of it. Her son, Yorick, who has a much harder time with his visions, often presenting in nightmares. And finally, Falion's young apprentice Agni, who claims to have had a scary dream in which she witnessed Falion making monsters. Interestingly, two of these characters claim to have witnessed Falion in their dreams, Agni directly, and Ygritte implies that she's seen what he gets up to at night. As for Yorick, whose scatterbrained dialogue often follows along the lines of this:
I get lost sometimes. I'm not sure where I go, but I'm not here.
He does rather curiously invoke Falion.
It's Falion. He did it. I don't know what it was, but he did it.
This to me suggests that Yorick has seen something, perhaps as part of one of his visions, in which Falion does something, and he's not entirely sure what. Not dissimilarly to Jarl Ygritte Ravencrone's vision of him that we can confirm should we follow him to the summoning circle and report what we've seen to the Jarl, which I can't imagine differs too greatly to Agni's account. Now, what I find interesting about the Jarl and Agni in particular is they're two characters who are sort of on Falion's side, especially when it comes to the suspicions of the rest of the town. And these visions give these characters negative impressions, with varying degrees of impact. It feels almost like some power is attempting to turn these characters against Falion, something Vermina attempts to do to us against Aranda should we aid him in cleansing Nightcaller Temple.
He's deceiving you. When the ritual's complete, the skull will be free, and then Aranda will turn on you. Quickly, kill him now. Kill him and claim the skull for your own. Vermina commands you.
Though it should be said the nightmares in Dawnstar are caused by the Skull of Corruption being nearby, and had only recently begun feeding on the memories of locals, though sure enough Vermina has other means to feed as well. And as a bit of further suggestion that Morthal may have a dream issue, Falion is known to make this particularly odd statement.
Morthal is a troubled place. It's my duty to see it rest in peace.
Now that is a strange thing to say. Not necessarily strange in the grand schemes of a mage, but for a very intelligent, deliberate character, to say that it's his duty to see Morthal rest in peace may be a very literal comment. After all, I doubt he means rest in peace as the phrase typically thrown to refer to those who have passed on, implying his duty is to kill everyone in town. Perhaps he's aware of the dreams experienced by the select few, and is aware of the possibility that their rest is less than restful. Or perhaps considering this is a different world to our own, the term rest in peace means something entirely different, and he may indeed be referring to more conscious threats. Either way, it's a very curious line of dialogue. Now, I don't suspect Falion is a former nor current worshipper of any Daedric prince. As made clear by the end of his time at the College of Winterhold, he doesn't particularly take pleasure in being beholden to anyone, so it's not such a stretch to assume that extends to everything. But being a master conjurer who has claimed to have met Dwemer and Daedra and everything in between, it's not a stretch to assume, regardless of his loyalties, he's on the radar of some very powerful forces. And rather uncharacteristically for unaffiliated conjurers, he chooses to live in society, which suggests despite Falion's capabilities, especially when it comes to what's frequently referred to as dark magic, he retains a moral compass and Vermina is known to despise that. Just like what appears to be the case with Aranda, formerly Brother Casimir, who used to worship Vermina and has since turned to the divines. Vermina very weakly attempts to convince us that he's to betray us, and encourages us to betray him first. But if you ignore her, he doesn't. But it shows she's not above manipulating people to betray those whose will and morality are unbreakable. It's less than clear what her motivations would be towards Falion in this theory, but since we're discussing a largely incomprehensible entity, perhaps because she can or she revels in the challenge is as good an explanation as any. And another hinging factor for this theory appears to be that Vermina is known to theoretically be capable of curing vampirism, but that would officially push us into waters more convoluted than I can hope to do justice. It's not a theory I'm terribly convinced by, but it is one worthy of mention. and it completes a series of possibilities as to what Falion's secret might be. He could be acting on behalf of or in spite of a Daedric prince. He could simply be looking for a peaceful life to carry out his research without being pestered by higher authorities, and safeguarding his ward the only way he knows how. It's clear he possesses complex knowledge, and may very well be putting that into action to protect Morthal from the vampire threat nearby, or some other issue that he's identified. After all, he seems to believe that he's helping keep Morthal safe, though his secretive nature often alienates those who don't actually know what he's doing. Or he may very well be searching for the forgotten power within Kienstag ruins, and to spice things up it may very well be a mixture. Most unfortunately, clarity on what it is in particular that he is doing goes wanting, but I suspect once upon a time Falion was intended to be a much more in-depth character, and perhaps there was once a more in-depth answer waiting at the bottom of this mystery that simply never came to fruition, and Falion was intended to be more than just one of few who can cure vampirism, even if in its own right that is quite an impressive accomplishment. And with that, I'm going to end today's mumbling session. If you made it this far into the video, thank you for putting up with me for the past hour or so. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, perhaps share the channel with your friends, and all that wonderful stuff. It would be massively appreciated. And maybe pop me a follow on some social media if you're interested, but in this day and age I wouldn't blame you if you weren't. And of course, let me know what you think about Falion down in the comments section. What do you think he's up to, if anything? I have to apologise for the length of the video, I didn't intend for it to be this long. But while we're here, I'd also like to know what other Elder Scrolls / Skyrim mysteries you'd like to see me explore in the future. And now I'm finally going to leave you. With any luck, I hope to see you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, please take care, and goodbye.